Did you know that the book of Numbers gets its name because it records two censuses or numberings of the Israelite people? But today we're focusing on something even more specific and incredibly relevant to our lives. Numbers chapter 32. Get ready, because this chapter, while seemingly about land, is packed with timeless lessons on commitment, integrity, and the ripple effect of our choices. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, Romans 9:20. I'm Ronald, and I'm thrilled to have you here today. Let's open our Bibles and get into it. Numbers chapter 32 tells a crucial story just as the Israelites are on the cusp of entering the promised land. The tribes of Reuben and Gad, seeing the fertile pasture land east of the Jordan River, approach Moses with a request. They want to settle there instead of crossing over with the other tribes. Now, Moses initially reacts strongly, fearing a repeat of the past rebellion and weakening of the entire nation's resolve. He reminds them of the disastrous consequences of the spies report years earlier. However, Reuben and Gad clarify their intentions. They promise to build fortified cities for their families and flocks, but then they will arm themselves and fight alongside their brothers until the land is conquered. Only then will they return to their inheritance east of the Jordan. Moses, after careful consideration, agrees to this compromise, but with a stern warning. If they don't fulfill their promise, they will be guilty before the Lord and face consequences. The half tribe of Manasseh also joins them in settling east of the Jordan, and the chapter concludes with a list of the cities that they build. Now, verses 1 to 5, the tribes of Reuben and Gad, who had many livestock, saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were excellent for grazing. They approached Moses, Eleazar the chief priest, and the leaders of the community, asking if they could be given this land as their inheritance rather than crossing the Jordan River into Canaan. They argue that it's suitable for their herds. These tribes had a practical concern. Their large herds needed good pastures, and they saw an opportunity to present their case, hoping to secure their future without having to participate in the upcoming conquest of Canaan. This was a significant request as it deviated from the divine plan of inheriting the land west of the Jordan. Verses 6 to 15, Moses was furious. He accuses them of wanting to discourage the other Israelites from crossing into the promised land, just as their ancestors had done after the negative report of the spies, which led to 40 years of wandering in the wilderness and God's wrath. He warned them that their actions would bring even more of God's anger upon the whole community. Now, Moses immediately recognized the potential danger. He remembered the devastating consequences of the previous lack of faith and willingness to fight. He saw the request not just as a personal preference, but as a potential spiritual and military setback for the entire nation, undermining their unity in God's command. Moses feared that the attitude of the tribes of Reuben and Gad would keep the other tribes from going into Canaan. Their attitude said, "We fought enough and have suffered enough already. Let us just settle down here where we are." Now, the fear of Moses had a foundation. When we keep company with those who are satisfied with what they have and have no desire to go deeper or press on further, their contentment often influences us. If these tribes were guilty of complacency, it could dangerously influence the other tribes. Now, verses 16 to 19, Reuben and Gad responded by proposing a plan. They would build fortified cities for their own families and sheep, but then they would go ahead of the other Israelites into battle. They would fight alongside their brothers until every tribe had received its inheritance across the Jordan. And then only after the land was subdued, with the return of their own inheritance east of the Jordan. They explicitly stated that they would not take any inheritance on the west side. Now, this was a crucial turning point. They clarified that their desire for the land was not an excuse to shirk responsibility. They committed to being active participants in the conquest, demonstrating their loyalty and solidarity with the other tribes. This showed a willingness to balance their personal needs with the collective good. Now, verses 20 to 27, Moses agreed to their proposal, stating that if they truly fulfilled their promise, if they armed themselves and crossed the Jordan to fight until the Lord had driven out all of the enemies and then returned, then they would be innocent before the Lord and Israel, and the land east of the Jordan would be their possession. But he warned them that if they did not do as they promised, they would have sinned against the Lord, and their sin would find them out. Your sin will find you out. I remember hearing a verse from a sermon by Billy Graham some time ago. Be sure your sin will find you out. And it always stuck with me. Now, the previous verse, verses 32, 20 to 22, says that if you do as you say you will do, then you would be blameless before the Lord. But if you do not do, then take note, you have sinned against the Lord. If they failed to do as they said, they would sin. The sin specifically spoken here is the sin of doing nothing, failing to serve their brethren, to fight on their behalf, to join in their struggles would be a sin, the sin of doing nothing. This was something Moses wanted them to take note of. If the tribes of Reuben and Gad did nothing, if they stayed at home while their brothers went to battle to take the possession of the promised land, then their sin of doing nothing would surely find them out. Spurgeon once preached that if you take the text as it stands, there is nothing about it with murder or theft or anything of the kind. In fact, it's not about what men do, but it's about what men do not do. The iniquity of doing nothing is a sin which is not so often spoke of as it should be. So the specific sin being referenced here is breaking a solemn promise or commitment made to God and to their fellow Israelites. Selfishness and shirking their responsibility to the community. If they were to settle comfortably on the east side of the Jordan and not help their brethren, it would be an act of unfaithfulness and would discourage the rest of the nation. And didn't we just discuss in a previous chapter about vows and the importance of keeping our word? See how God is so perfect and just and always gives us exactly what we need in his perfect timing. Now, moving on to verses 28 to 32, Moses then gave instruction to Eleazar the priest, Joshua his successor, and the tribal leaders. He reiterates that if Reuben and Gad crossed over armed and fought until the land was conquered, they could be given their inheritance east of the Jordan. But if they refused to cross over and fight, they would have to take their inheritance among the other tribes in Canaan. Reuben and Gad affirmed their commitment to Moses' terms, so Moses solidified the agreement by involving the future leaders, ensuring that the terms were clear and that they would be upheld. This public declaration reinforced the seriousness of the commitment and the consequences of failing to honor it. The central message of Numbers chapter 32 is about the weight of our word and the importance of integrity in our commitments. It teaches us that our personal desires, while valid, must be balanced with our responsibilities to the community and to God. Moses' initial reaction highlights the danger of self-interest leading to the lack of commitment, which can have far-reaching negative consequences for everyone. The tribes of Reuben and Gad, by clarifying their intentions and committing to fight alongside their brothers, demonstrated that true faith involves action and fulfilling promises. Now, in our modern society, this chapter serves as a powerful reminder. Whether it's our own jobs, our relationships, or community involvement, our integrity is tested by how we follow through on what we say we will do. Do we prioritize our comfort over the collective good? Do we make promises lightly, or do we understand that our word is a bond? This chapter encourages us to be people of our word, to understand that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for those around us, and ultimately for our relationship with God. When we honor our commitments, we build trust, strengthen community, and walk in alignment with divine principles. Now, that brings us to the end of the breakdown of Numbers chapter 32. I hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective on this often overlooked but incredibly relevant part of Scripture. The lessons on commitment, integrity, and the consequences of our choices are timeless. And if any part of this video has touched you, resonated with your spirit, or simply made you think, please consider hitting that subscribe button, leaving a comment below, and sharing this video with someone who might benefit from it. Your engagement helps this channel grow and reach more people with these important messages. So until next time, stay blessed and keep seeking truth.